3. Shelley's lead homicide sergeant, Roy Peterson, arrived on the scene first, followed shortly by his team, then Deputy Dan Mitchell. Roy put his detectives to work, then paused long enough to confer with Shelley and Dan outside the Easy Gas. The sweltering August heat had already darkened their uniforms with sweat, but was still easier to take than the rapidly increasing stench of blood and gore inside the tiny convenience store. No sign of media yet, which just went to show there were some advantages to being a backwoods town, given that Bakersville was nestled equidistant between the bustling metropolis of Portland, Oregon, and political fuss of the state's capital, Salem. Shelley didn't expect that situation to last for long. 90 minutes was an easy enough drive for a rabid reporter hell-bent on the latest tale of violence, though sadly, a convenience store shooting was hardly newsworthy in this day and age. Only the location of the murders, the proverbial small town, would make it a story of note. Call came into dispatch 8:04 a.m. Shelley related to her sergeant, tone clipped, report of shots fired. I arrived on scene at approximately 8:16 a.m., discovering 2 bodies inside, one a young male, approximately mid-20s, second a young female, 18, 19 years of age. Both appeared to have been shot multiple times. Owner of the store, Roy quizzed. Don Juarez, Shelley answered, having already asked dispatch the same question. I spoke to him briefly by phone. He was headed to Salem but is returning now. He tentatively identified the cashier as Erin Hill. At least that's who was scheduled to work this morning, and the body matches her description. She's from a local family. I already contacted Officer Estevan, asked her to pay the parents a visit. And the DOA mail, Roy asked. No ID, no wallet. Maybe shooter grabbed it on his way out. Truck outside is registered to a fishing charter company. We'll need to fax the vehicle registration over to our counterparts in Salem. Maybe one of them can get us a name. Got Rebecca and Hal photographing the scene, bagging and tagging evidence, Roy reported. ME should be here shortly. So far, we've recovered 9 shell casings, 1 slug, 9 shots for 2 victims. Shelley shook her head. Seems a bit much. Male customer was shot 3 times to the chest, once to the head. Female clerk the same, single shot to the head, 3 to the torso, including 1 slug through the palm of her hand. Weapon, Shelley asked. Recovered slug appears to be 9mm. Shelley sighed. 9mm handguns were common enough, especially around here. Certainly wouldn't narrow their search any. Dan spoke up. That's 8 bullets. Roy and Shelley glanced at him. 4 shots for each victim. Dan supplied. 8 bullets. But you mentioned 9 casings. So where's the last shot? Oh, haven't gotten to that part yet. Shelley smiled grimly. Turns out, we got a 3rd victim. Store security camera, which, with any luck at all, might be our lone witness. Here was the issue. Security cameras fell under the umbrella of technology. Being a rural county department, Bakersville didn't have a technology expert or forensic computer tech, meaning their safest bet was to wait for assistance from the state police. Except Shelley didn't feel like waiting. She had a double homicide in a town that saw only a handful of murders each year. Community leaders would be demanding answers sooner rather than later. Hell, Shelley wanted answers sooner rather than later. On the other hand, botch recovery of the video, and they'd be ruining one of the only leads they had. Business of this size, location, Roy was saying now. How complicated can the security system be? Odds are, it was picked up at an office superstore. Nothing so sophisticated 3 well-trained members of law enforcement couldn't figure it out. Both Roy and Shelley turned to Dan. He was their resident tech expert, which was to say, he was the youngest member on the force and the one who managed their online community outreach. You saw the camera? He asked Shelley. Mounted behind the cash register, up near the ceiling. Big, little, old, new, small. Well, what remained of it? Black plastic, she added helpfully. So an electronic eye. Dan nodded. In that case, actual footage is most likely recorded to a DVR. This place got a back office. Yeah, straight through there. Shelley pointed to the open door of the Easy Gas, where a flash of light indicated the detectives were still snapping photos. The other downside of attempting to retrieve the security video now, they risked further contamination of the crime scene. What do you want to do? Roy asked her. I don't want to wait an hour for state assist, Shelley said. Roy grimaced. An hour? I'm guessing more like half a day. True. All right, Dan, you're with me. If the security system seems too complicated, we can always call the owner for assistance. But somewhere out there is a double murderer. I want to see his face. The flies were everywhere. Shelley grimaced as they buzzed thickly over the holes in the male victim's chest. For it, her first instinct was to shoo them away, but she knew from experience there wouldn't be any point. Hal looked up from his camera, greeting her and Dan with a small nod of acknowledgement. They nodded back, none of them speaking. Air was hotter in here, the stench of blood and death forcing them to breathe through their mouths. Shelley kept as far right as possible, Dan following in her footsteps, so they would disturb the area the least amount possible. They sidled past the body, then tiptoed down the outer aisle to arrive at the wall of cold drinks. In front of the refrigeration units, the air felt marginally cooler, and Shelley exhaled softly. From this vantage point, she could look back toward the front door and take in nearly all of the small, six-aisle store. The front counter, to the right of the door, was partially obscured by bags of chips, but looking up, Shelley could see the camera in question, a small black eye, now dangling haphazardly, the lens shattered by a bullet. "Good shot," she murmured. Dan shrugged. "For all we know, he was standing right beneath it at the time." "All the better to see you with," Shelley agreed, leading the way past the refrigeration units to a plain wooden door marked "Employees Only." The office door was locked. Dan grimaced, probably already wondering which of them would have to search the dead cashier for the key. Shelley, however, had a better idea. Pulling on gloves, she raised one hand, ran it along the top of the door frame, and sure enough, she smiled. Dan chuckled softly. Then, as if realizing how out of place such a thing sounded, he fell back to silence. Shelley inserted the plain brass key into the lock, eased the door open. If the small convenience store was hot, the windowless back office was stifling. In a coastal town known for mild temperatures, plenty of places didn't have air conditioning, and this store was no exception. When Shelley snapped on the overhead light, she discovered a tiny fan perched on a top shelf, someone's idea of heat relief. Otherwise, the standing room-only space contained a plank of wood topping two dinged-up metal filing cabinets, a battered-looking laptop, and, sure enough, a DVR, matte black, clearly new, stuck in a back corner with an attached monitor. "Looks like a recent purchase," Dan said from behind Shelley's shoulder. The small space forced them to stand close, which only made the heat that much more uncomfortable. "Recent thefts, suspicions," Shelley murmured. The security system was a lucky break. Even basic models were over $100, which, for a business that looked as worn and tired as this one, couldn't have been an easy expense. She shifted to the side, sucking in her gut as Dan squeezed past, eyeing the DVR. "Most systems offer immediate playback," Dan said, already punching buttons on the DVR. He worked his tech magic, then an icon for super security appeared on the monitor. A few seconds later, the screen filled with the top-back view of a woman's head. The cashier, Shelley thought, Erin Hill, who'd started work at 4 a.m. and dutifully activated the security system. Dan fiddled again, moving them forward in time. 5 a.m. 6, 7, 7:30. Then, not a bad image, fixed, which was a little disorienting, black and white. Customers appeared and disappeared from the side of the screen, while the back of Erin's head remained dead center. From time to time, she also disappeared, maybe sitting down to read a book, or, more likely, play on her phone. During the lulls, 7:53 a.m. the male victim appeared. Shelley made out the side of his face as he briefly walked into the store, then disappeared down the aisle in search of chips. 30 seconds, 40, 50, the man reappeared, full face shot now as he stood at the counter and dug around in his pocket for a wad of cash. No audio, they could see but not hear. Given that the guy's mouth was moving, he was saying something to Erin. She must have replied, because he appeared to laugh in response. Then he pocketed his change, grabbed his bag of chips, turned toward the entrance. Suddenly, his arms flew into the air, his body seemed to jerk, then stumble back, then jerk again. He went down, his head disappearing off-screen till they were left with only the image of his sprawled legs. Erin turned, her dark hair, their single focal point, suddenly whipping around. She gazed up at the camera, eyes wide, terrified. Shelley couldn't see her mouth, only the top half of her face. Was she screaming? Was she trying to tell them something? At the side of the screen, a bare forearm came into view, holding a gun. Pop, 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 and Erin disappeared from sight. A life ended, just like that. Shelley found herself leaning over Dan's shoulder, staring at the video intently, as the shooter's arm came down, vanished off the screen. No, the shooter had to appear. He still had to take out the camera. A lull, maybe the shooter pausing to check around outside. See if the sound of shots aroused any nearby suspicion, or maybe he did rifle through the male victim's truck. But eventually, 3, 4, 5 minutes later, a lone figure walked into view. Not a man, a kid, younger than even his first victim, maybe even younger than Aaron Hill, wearing a bulky black hoodie, sleeves balled up at his elbows but still totally inappropriate for a 90-degree August morning. The boy approached the counter. He didn't look back at his first victim, nor down at his second. Instead, he peered directly up at the camera, stared straight at it, wearing the flattest expression Shelley had ever seen. No remorse, no glee, not a drop of sweat on his brow. The dark-eyed boy stared at Shelley through the lens. Then he raised his arm and fired. Shelley had to take a moment to get her breath back. Leaning over the monitor, Dan wasn't doing much better. Recognize him at all? Shelley asked her deputy. No, me neither. She doubted it mattered. An image this good, a description this solid, they should have a name within hours. He didn't ask for money, Dan murmured. No, didn't even talk to them, just walked in, murdered 2 people. I know. Did you see his eyes? Shelley nodded. She understood what her deputy was trying to say. What happened here? Dan asked, his voice more plaintive now. I don't know, she told him honestly, but I know who to ask. Pierce Quincy. If this video is anything to go by, we're gonna need a profiler's insights. But the shooter's motivation isn't our biggest question yet. What's our biggest question? A kid who kills this easily, is he done yet?